How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This video is made for educational purposes only. This book is about learning how to communicate effectively and build strong relationships with others. It offers practical advice on how to win friends and influence people in both personal and professional settings, helping readers improve their lives through better human interaction. The book's core message is that understanding and mastering the art of human relations can lead to greater success and fulfillment in life. In 1937, Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. It started with just 5,000 copies, but it became super popular. People loved it, and it kept selling for decades. Even today, it's still a big hit. The book helped people feel understood and gave them tools to build better relationships. Dale Carnegie knew how to talk to people, and he shared his ideas in a way that felt natural and real. He kept updating his courses and his book to match what people needed, even as the world changed. He believed in making people feel valued and respected. The book was translated into many languages, and it stayed relevant because it spoke to real human needs. But over time, some parts of the book felt old. Some names and examples were from a different time. So, the book was revised to make it easier to understand now, without changing the main ideas. The style is still lively and friendly, like Dale Carnegie himself. The revision helps people today learn from his wisdom in a way that feels fresh and useful. Thousands of people are still learning from his work, and they're inspired to improve their lives. Dale Carnegie started writing this book because he saw a big problem people faced: how to deal with each other. He had been teaching business and professional people for years, helping them speak better and think clearly. But he realized they needed more than just speaking skills. They needed to know how to get along with people in their everyday lives. He wanted to help them build better relationships and influence others in a friendly way. He looked at studies and found that most of a person's success in life isn't from their job skills, but from how well they can work with people. He talked to a lot of successful people like inventors, politicians, and business leaders to learn what worked. He wrote a talk about these ideas, and it grew and grew until it became a full lecture. He tested these ideas with his students, and they saw real changes. One boss who used to be strict and unkind became kind and inspired his workers. Salespeople made more money, and even families became happier. People were amazed at how much they could change their lives with these simple, practical ideas. He didn't just write a book, he created a new way for people to learn about human relationships. He believed that everyone has untapped potential and that these ideas could help them live better, more fulfilling lives. Dale Carnegie wanted to make sure people really understood how to use the ideas in his book. He gave 9 tips to help them learn better. First, he said the most important thing was to really want to improve how they deal with people. Without that, nothing else would help. He encouraged people to keep thinking about how these ideas could make their lives better. He told them to read each chapter twice, first quickly to get the main points, then again carefully. They should stop often to think about how to use what they were reading. He suggested using a pencil or highlighter to mark important parts so they could review them later. Carnegie shared a story about a woman who read the same insurance contracts every month because she needed to remember them. He said people forget quickly, so they should review the book every month and keep it near them. He also said learning is about doing. People should try applying the ideas in real life, even if it's hard. He mentioned a Wall Street banker who reviewed his own work every week to improve. That helped him become successful. Carnegie encouraged people to make learning fun by offering a reward to friends when they caught them using the principles. He also suggested keeping a record of their successes to stay motivated. Carnegie told a story about a man named Two Gun Crowley, a dangerous criminal who killed a policeman. The police chased him for weeks until they caught him in an apartment. During the whole thing, Crowley kept firing at the police. When they finally captured him, he wrote a letter saying he had a kind heart and didn't mean to hurt anyone. He said he was defending himself. This showed that Crowley didn't blame himself for his actions. Carnegie used this example to explain that many criminals don't see themselves as bad people. They think they're doing the right thing. He then talked about Al Capone, a famous gang leader, who also didn't blame himself. Capone said he was helping people have fun and that he was misunderstood. Other criminals like Dutch Schultz said the same thing. Carnegie even talked to a prison warden, Lewis Laws, who said most criminals in prison didn't see themselves as bad. They made up reasons to justify what they did. Carnegie then gave an example about a safety officer named George Johnston. He used to tell workers they had to wear hard hats, but they didn't listen. Then he changed his approach. He asked if the hats were uncomfortable and reminded them they were for safety. This worked better, and the workers obeyed without being upset. Carnegie used historical examples too, like the fight between Theodore Roosevelt and Taft and the Teapot Dome scandal. He showed how criticism didn't change people and often made them fight back. Even Abraham Lincoln, who was great at dealing with people, learned not to criticize others after a bad experience with a duel. Carnegie used Abraham Lincoln as a powerful example of how criticism can backfire. Lincoln was a great leader, but he learned the hard way that shouting at people doesn't work. He tried to tell General Meade to attack Lee immediately, but Meade refused. Lincoln was angry and even wrote a harsh letter to Meade, but he never sent it. He realized that criticism only makes people fight back. Instead, he decided to be patient and understand. Carnegie also talked about Mark Twain, who sometimes wrote mean letters to people who upset him. But Twain's wife kept the letters from being sent, so no harm was done. Carnegie said it's better to work on yourself than to try to change others. He mentioned Confucius's advice about not complaining about others' problems when your own are messy. He shared a story about himself when he was young. He wrote a rude letter to Richard Harding Davis, and Davis replied with a sharp insult. That hurt Carnegie for years, showing how criticism can linger for a long time. Carnegie stressed that people are emotional and proud, not logical. He said we should try to understand others instead of judging them. Carnegie gave examples of famous people like Thomas Hardy and Thomas Chatterton, who were hurt by criticism. He ended with a story about a father who realized he was being too strict with his son. The father learned to be kind and understanding, showing how important it is to avoid criticism. Lincoln once wrote a letter to Meade that was angry and harsh, but he never sent it. He realized that criticism only makes people fight back. Instead, he decided to be patient and understand. Carnegie used this as an example to show how important it is to avoid criticism and focus on making others feel important. He said that people are emotional and proud, not logical. The only way to get people to do things is by making them want to do it. That means giving them what they want. What do people really want? They want to feel important. This is more important than food or money. It's a deep, strong desire that drives people to act. Carnegie talked about famous people like Lincoln, Dickens, and Rockefeller, all of whom were driven by the need to feel important. He also mentioned criminals and people who fake illnesses just to feel important. He even talked about people going insane to feel important because they couldn't in the real world. But he said that if we can give people honest appreciation, we can change their lives for the better. He used the example of Charles Schwab, who was paid a huge salary not because he knew more about steel, but because he knew how to make people feel important. Schwab said that praising people and giving them encouragement was the best way to get them to work hard. He never criticized anyone. That's the secret to influencing people. Most people do the opposite. They criticize when they don't like something and say nothing when they do. That's why people don't feel important. It's a powerful idea. It's the key to winning friends and influencing people. Carnegie talked about how people work better when they feel appreciated. He used Charles Schwab as an example. Schwab said he never criticized people because he knew people did better work when they felt good about themselves. He said he had never met a person, no matter how important, who didn't do better under approval than under criticism. He also talked about Andrew Carnegie, who praised his workers in public and even wanted to be remembered for it. He wrote an epitaph that said he knew how to get around men who were smarter than him. Carnegie mentioned John D. Rockefeller, who praised his partner, Edward T. Bedford, even after he lost $1 million. Rockefeller said he saved 60% of the money, and that was enough for him to be happy. He didn't criticize, he appreciated. He shared a story about a farm woman who cooked for her family but never got thanked. She was sad because she felt her efforts weren't noticed. He also told a story about a man who didn't criticize his wife when she asked for his honest opinion. Instead, he sent her flowers and a note. She was so moved, she almost cried. Carnegie talked about how appreciation can change lives. He mentioned Florence Ziegfeld, who made chorus girls feel special and gave them better pay and recognition. He also talked about Stevie Wonder, who became a great singer because a teacher once praised his hearing. Carnegie warned against flattery. He said it's insincere and can hurt people in the long run. He preferred honest appreciation. He encouraged people to look for the good in others and give them sincere praise. He said people need appreciation like they need food, and that it can build strong friendships and respect. Carnegie told a story about fishing in Maine. He said fish like worms, not strawberries and cream. So he used what the fish wanted, not what he wanted. He said the same idea works with people. You should think about what they want, not what you want. He gave an example of Lloyd George, the British Prime Minister. He stayed in power because he knew how to make people feel like their needs were met. Carnegie said the key to influencing others is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. He shared a story about a man trying to get a calf into the barn. The man and his son pulled and pushed, but the calf didn't move. A housemaid helped by letting the calf suck her finger. She thought about what the calf wanted, not what she or the man wanted. Carnegie said every action people take is because they want something. Even giving to charity is because someone wants to feel good or be recognized. He told another story about his sister-in-law. Her sons didn't write home, so she was worried. Carnegie bet he could get a reply. He wrote a friendly letter and mentioned sending money in the postscript. The boys replied quickly, happy to get a letter from Uncle Andrew. He also shared a story about a man named Stan. His son didn't want to go to kindergarten. Stan didn't argue. Instead, he talked about all the fun things his son would do. He made a list and acted it out. The son got excited and wanted to go. The next morning, the son was already waiting to go. Carnegie said, when you want to persuade someone, ask yourself, how can I make this person want to do it? He gave an example of when he had to pay more rent for a ballroom. He didn't argue about what he wanted. Instead, he talked about what the hotel manager wanted. He listed the advantages and disadvantages for the manager. The manager agreed to a smaller increase. He ended with a quote from Henry Ford. Ford said the secret to success is seeing things from the other person's point of view. Carnegie said this is simple but most people ignore it. He gave an example of a letter from an advertising executive that ignored this idea. Carnegie showed a letter that made the person who got it really angry. The letter was from an advertising person who didn't care about the other person's needs. He just wanted to get on a list and didn't ask nicely. The person who got the letter wrote back in a funny, sarcastic way, saying the letter was bad and the sender needed to take iodine. Then Carnegie gave another example of a letter that didn't work. A freight company wrote to a business asking them to change when they delivered goods, but they didn't explain why it mattered to the business. The business got upset and didn't help. Carnegie then showed a better version of the letter. This one started by praising the business, explained the problem, and then said what was in it for them. The business liked it and agreed to help. He told a story about a woman named Barbara who wanted to move to Arizona. She wrote to banks there, not asking for a job, but saying how she could help them. She got offers from many banks. Carnegie said people don't want to be sold to. They want to feel like they're helping. Salespeople who focus on what the customer wants, not just what they want, do better. He gave an example of two insurance agents. One was excited and made people want the policy, while the other just talked about it without making them care. The excited one got more sales. Carnegie ended by saying that thinking about others and showing them how they can benefit is a powerful way to win friends and influence people. It helps everyone involved. Carnegie talked about how people love to feel important and to help others. He used a story about a little boy who didn't want to eat properly. His parents tried scolding him, but it didn't work. The boy only cared about riding his tricycle and getting revenge on a bully who kept taking it. The father realized he needed to connect what the boy wanted with what the parents wanted. He promised the boy that if he ate right, he'd be strong enough to fight the bully. The boy started eating everything, even things he didn't like, just to feel powerful. The same idea worked for the boy's bedwetting. His parents gave him a bed of his own and pajamas like his dad. He suddenly wanted to act like a big kid and kept his promise. Another parent, K.T. Dutchman, used the same trick with his daughter. He let her make breakfast, and she ate it because she felt like she was helping. Carnegie said that if you can make people feel like they're helping or that they're important, they'll follow you. He reminded everyone that people don't want to be sold to, they want to feel like they're helping. Carnegie wanted to show how important it is to really care about other people. He started by talking about a dog, Tippy, who was his best friend when he was a kid. Tippy would always run to meet him every day, and he loved him so much. But one day, Tippy was struck by lightning and died. That was the saddest moment of Carnegie's childhood. He said that dogs are the only animals that don't have to work. They just give love and joy. He used this story to explain that if you really care about people, you can make more friends than you ever could by trying to make them care about you. He said people are only interested in themselves, and they don't care about you unless you show you care about them. He gave examples like a telephone company study that found people use the word I a lot, showing they're focused on themselves. He also mentioned Napoleon and how even he couldn't rely on his wife. Then he talked about a magician named Howard Thurston, who was very successful because he truly loved his audience and wanted to please them. He also told the story of an old man named George Dyke who made friends by showing genuine interest in other people. Then he shared how Theodore Roosevelt was loved by everyone he met, even his servants, because he treated them like friends. Finally, he gave an example of a salesperson named Edward Sykes who won back a customer because he showed real interest in the store workers, not just the owner. All these stories showed that being genuinely interested in others is the key to winning friends and influencing people. Dale Carnegie told a story about the German Kaiser, who was hated by almost everyone. Even his own people turned on him when he ran away during World War I. But one little boy wrote him a letter full of kindness and admiration. The boy said he would always love the Kaiser, no matter what others thought. The Kaiser was moved and invited the boy and his mother to visit. He even married the boy's mother. Carnegie said this boy didn't need a book to know how to win friends, he just knew how to care about others. He gave more examples, like the Duke of Windsor, who learned Spanish so he could speak to people in South America. People loved him for it. Carnegie also talked about how he remembered friends' birthdays by asking them about astrology, then writing them down. When their birthday came, he sent them a letter or telegram, and they were always surprised and happy. He shared a story about a man named Mr. Walters, who needed information from a company president. At first, the president didn't want to talk. But when Walters remembered something about stamps and a boy, he changed his mind. The president was so happy to help that he gave him all the information he needed. Another example was a man named Naffel who couldn't sell fuel to a chain store. He tried to argue with them, but nothing worked. Then he asked for help instead, pretending he needed facts for a debate. The chain store executive was so impressed he offered to buy fuel from him. Carnegie ended by saying that showing real interest in others is the key to making friends. He quoted an old Roman poet who said people care about you when you care about them. He also shared a touching story about a nurse who helped a lonely boy on Thanksgiving, showing how real interest can change lives. Carnegie told a story about a woman at a dinner party in New York. She had money but looked unhappy. She dressed nicely but didn't smile. People didn't like her because her face showed she was sour and selfish. Carnegie said that a smile is more important than clothes. He mentioned Charles Schwab, who smiled a lot and was very successful. A smile shows you like someone and makes them happy. Dogs and babies smile and people like them because it feels good. He shared a story about a doctor's waiting room. Everyone was bored and grumpy. A woman came in with a baby and a cat. The baby smiled, and a man smiled back. They started talking and everyone joined in. The mood changed from sad to happy. Carnegie talked about how a real smile helps in work and life. A psychologist said smiling helps people manage, teach, and sell better. A store manager said she would rather hire someone with a smile than a smart person who didn't smile. Even when you're on the phone, smiling changes your voice and makes people like you. He shared a story about a stockbroker named William Steinhardt. He used to be a grumpy man who never smiled. He tried smiling every day for a week and found his life changed. His wife was surprised, and he became happier, more successful, and had more friends. He stopped being mean and started being kind. Carnegie said if you don't feel like smiling, force yourself to. Act happy and you'll start to feel it. He quoted a psychologist who said acting cheerfully can make you feel cheerful. He also said happiness comes from how you think, not what you have. Two people can be in the same place with the same things but feel very different because of their thoughts. He told a story about some boys on crutches who were happy even though they were disabled. They made him realize that happiness is about how you look at life. He encouraged people to be friendly, smile, and act confidently. He said thinking about what you want and acting on it will bring it to you. A man who doesn't smile shouldn't open a shop. Your smile shows you're friendly and willing to help. It makes people feel better, especially when they're stressed or sad. A smile can make someone feel like things are still okay, even when everything seems hard. Carnegie talked about a department store in New York that gave a message about smiles during Christmas. They said a smile costs nothing but brings a lot. It makes people happy and helps businesses get along better. A smile can be like light in a dark room, giving hope and joy. It's not something you can buy or steal, but when you give it, it makes both you and the person you give it to feel better. He said if you're too tired to smile, maybe the person you're helping needs it more. So you should give them a smile instead. Smiles help build friendships and make people feel valued. They're a simple way to show kindness and bring happiness to others. A man named Jim Farley had a terrible accident in 1898. He was trying to hitch his horse when the animal kicked him and killed him. His family was left in a lot of trouble. But Jim's oldest son, also named Jim, grew up to be a very successful person. He didn't go to school much, but he had a natural talent for making people like him. He went into politics and became a big leader. He even helped get Franklin D. Roosevelt into the White House. Jim Farley had a secret to his success. He remembered people's names. He made it a habit to learn names and details about people. When he met someone, he asked about their family, job, and opinions. He kept those details in his mind, and later, when he saw them again, he would remember everything. That made people feel special and helped him build strong relationships. Farley used this skill in his work too. He wrote letters to thousands of people, calling them by their names. He even had a system to track who he had talked to. He made sure each person felt important. People loved getting letters from him because they knew he remembered them. This idea of remembering names and using it to connect with others was also used by Andrew Carnegie. He built a steel mill named after J. Edgar Thomson, the president of the railroad. He also helped settle a big fight between two companies by suggesting they merge, and he made sure to honor Pullman's name in the new company. Remembering names is a powerful way to make people feel valued. It helps build trust and friendships. Even busy people like Franklin D. Roosevelt made time to remember names because they knew how important it was. People want to be remembered, and when they are more likely to support you. Franklin D. Roosevelt knew that remembering names was one of the easiest and most important ways to make people like you. But most people forget names quickly, even when they're introduced to someone. He learned early that if you forget a voter's name, you're forgotten too. Remembering names is just as important in business and everyday life as it is in politics. Even Napoleon III, a French emperor, made sure he remembered every name he met. If he didn't hear a name clearly, he asked how it was spelled and repeated it several times. He even wrote the name down and then tore it up so he'd remember it better. It took time, but he believed it was worth it. Ken Nottingham, a worker at General Motors, showed how this works. He noticed a woman at the cafeteria always looked unhappy. He started calling her by her name, Eunice, and she changed her attitude. She gave him more food and smiled. A name can make a big difference. It makes a person feel special and valued. So, when you talk to someone, use their name. It's a simple way to build trust and make friends. So, here's a story about how to be a good talker. Once, Dale Carnegie went to a bridge party. He didn't know how to play bridge, and there was a woman there who didn't either. She found out he used to work with Lowell Thomas, a famous radio guy, and that he had traveled a lot. She asked him to tell her about all the places he had been. He said, "Africa. How interesting. I've always wanted to see Africa, but I never got there except for a 24-hour stay once in Algiers." He made her feel like she was the interesting one, and she talked for 45 minutes about her trip to Africa. She didn't want to hear about his travels. She just wanted to feel important. Dale met a botanist at a dinner party too. He didn't know much about plants, but he listened intently. The botanist felt that attention and interest. He even told the botanist he wished he had his knowledge and that he loved to wander the fields with him. The botanist said he was a most interesting conversationalist. But Dale hadn't said much. He had just listened. Dale realized that listening is one of the best compliments you can give someone. He also talked about how important listening is in business. A customer was upset with a store because they wouldn't return a damaged coat. The clerk refused to listen, but the manager did. The manager fixed the problem, and the customer stayed a long-time customer. Dale also shared a story about a customer who was very angry with a phone company. The customer kept complaining, but the phone rep listened. After a few visits, the customer became a friend and even joined a group he was starting. Dale concluded that listening is a powerful tool. It builds trust and makes people feel valued. It can turn angry customers into loyal ones. It can make friends and help you influence people. It's not about talking a lot, but about being truly interested in what others have to say. Dale talked about a young boy who was invited to dinner by someone important. The boy was only 14, but he listened carefully and talked a lot. Because of that, he started writing letters to famous people like Emerson, Longfellow, and even Lincoln's wife. Soon, he was having dinner with some of the most respected people in the country. This made him more confident and helped shape his whole life. All of this happened because he knew how to listen. Dale also mentioned a journalist named Isaac Marcusson, who said many people fail to make good impressions because they don't listen. They're too busy thinking about what they'll say next. Important people, like famous leaders, prefer good listeners over good talkers. Even regular people want to feel heard. A Reader's Digest article said many people just want someone to listen, not fix their problems. Dale gave an example from the Civil War. Lincoln asked a friend to come to Washington and talk for hours. Lincoln wasn't looking for advice, he just wanted someone to listen. After talking, he felt better. People, Dale said, often just want someone to listen when they're upset. He also talked about Freud, who was a great listener. People who met him said he listened with real attention and care. Dale warned that people who never listen and only talk about themselves are boring and uneducated. They don't care about others and end up being disliked. Dale talked about how important it is to talk about what other people care about. He gave the example of Theodore Roosevelt, who knew how to impress his guests by showing he cared about their interests. Roosevelt would read about his visitors before they arrived, so he could talk about the things they loved. This made them feel valued and interested in him. He told a story about a boy named William Lyon Phelps who was excited about boats. A visitor talked to him about boats even though he didn't care about them. The boy was so impressed he remembered it forever. That visitor was a gentleman who knew how to make people feel important by talking about what they liked. Dale also shared a story about a man named Edward Chalif who needed help from a rich businessman. Instead of asking for what he wanted right away, Chalif talked about something the businessman cared about: $1 million check. That made the businessman excited and willing to help. Chalif got more than he asked for because he focused on what the other person valued. Another example was a man named Henry Duvernoy who tried for years to sell bread to a hotel manager. Nothing worked until he found out the manager loved a group called the Hotel Greeters. By talking about that group, Duvernoy got the manager's attention and won the business. Dale also mentioned a man named Edward Harriman who wanted a job in a town with few opportunities. He learned that a powerful businessman named R.J. Funkhauser was interested in power and money. Harriman talked to Funkhauser's secretary about her interests and then convinced Funkhauser to hire him. He stayed with the company for over 20 years. All these stories show that when you talk about what someone else cares about, they are more likely to listen and help you. It's a powerful way to connect with people and get what you want. Dale Carnegie told a story about a time he was waiting in line at the post office. He noticed the clerk looked bored and uninterested. Instead of just doing his own business, he decided to try and make the clerk like him. He thought about what he could genuinely admire about the man. It wasn't hard. He admired the clerk's hair. He said, "I certainly wish I had your head of hair." The clerk was surprised but pleased. He smiled and said it wasn't as good as it used to be. Dale praised it anyway, saying it was still magnificent. The clerk was happy, and they talked for a while. Dale felt great, because he had made the clerk feel important without asking for anything in return. He also talked about how people love to feel important and appreciated. He gave examples of how showing sincere admiration can change lives, like how a shy boy named Chris felt proud when his teacher believed in him. Dale explained that everyone wants to feel valued, and the key to winning friends is making others feel important. He shared a story about a lawyer who visited an old lady and talked about her house and her belongings. She was so impressed by his sincere interest that she offered him her car. He politely refused, but she insisted. She said she didn't want to give it to her relatives and wanted him to have it instead. Dale talked about how people love to feel important and how showing real admiration can change things. He told the story of an old lady who had a special car she really loved. A lawyer visited her and talked about her house and her things. She was so happy he cared that she gave him her car. He tried to refuse, but she insisted. She said she wanted to give it to someone who really appreciated it. She had been lonely and needed someone to care about her, and he made her feel special. Then Dale told another story about a man named Donald who was working on a big estate. The owner, a judge, came out to talk about planting flowers. Donald said he admired the judge's dogs and his success with them. The judge was so pleased he showed him everything: his kennel, his prizes, even his dog's pedigree. He even offered Donald a puppy. Donald was surprised but happy. The judge spent a lot of time with him because he felt appreciated. Dale also shared how even a rich man like George Eastman, who made millions, still wanted to feel valued. A businessman, James Adamson, wanted to win a big order from Eastman. He went to Eastman's office and started by complimenting the room. Eastman was so impressed he talked for hours about his life, his struggles, and his dreams. Adamson asked questions and listened. Eastman even invited him to his home to paint chairs. In the end, Eastman gave the big order to Adamson because he felt valued. Finally, Dale told about a restaurant owner in France who saved his employee by making her feel important. He talked to her, showed he cared, and she stayed. Dale told a story about a time he was in London, working for Sir Ross Smith, a famous pilot. At a big dinner, someone said a quote was from the Bible, but Dale knew it was from Shakespeare. He argued with the man, but then his friend Frank Gammond told him he was wrong. Frank said Dale should not argue because it makes people feel bad. Dale realized he had made the man uncomfortable and put his friend in a bad spot. He learned that arguing never wins anyone over. Dale had always loved arguing, even as a kid and in college. He taught debating and even thought about writing a book on it. But after seeing so many arguments, he realized you can't win an argument. If you win, the other person feels bad. If you lose, you lose. Dale met a man named Pat, who used to argue with customers and never sold anything. Pat learned to stop arguing and just listen. He started to succeed. Dale also shared a story about a tax inspector who was angry and stubborn. A man named Mr. Parsons stopped arguing and instead praised the inspector. The inspector softened and even helped him. Dale said people want to feel important, and arguing only makes them feel worse. He ended with a quote from Lincoln about not wasting time on arguments. He also gave tips on how to handle disagreements without fighting. He said to listen, find common ground, and be honest. He ended by saying disagreements can turn into friendships if handled right. Dale talked about how arguing with people is a sure way to make enemies. He used an example from Theodore Roosevelt, who said if he could be right 75% of the time, he'd be happy. But Dale said most people aren't that good at being right. So why argue? He said when you tell someone they're wrong, you hurt their pride and make them want to fight back. It never makes them change their mind. Dale gave a story about a lawyer who told a Supreme Court justice he was wrong. The lawyer was right, but the justice didn't like it. Dale said that's not helpful. People don't like being told they're wrong. They get defensive and don't want to change their minds. He said it's better to say, I may be wrong. Let's look at the facts together. That way, people feel respected and are more open to listening. He shared a story about a car dealer named Harold Rinke. He used to be harsh with customers, but then he started saying, we may have made a mistake. Tell me about it. That made customers feel heard and helped them settle disputes more easily. Dale said admitting you might be wrong is a good way to stop arguments and make people want to be fair. He also talked about how people are biased and don't like their beliefs challenged. He mentioned a psychologist named Carl Rogers who said it's important to understand others instead of judging them. Dale ended by saying, if you want to be a good friend and leader, you should avoid arguments and focus on understanding and respect. He also suggested reading Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, which showed how Franklin changed from being argumentative to being diplomatic. Dale said the key is to be humble, listen, and avoid making others feel attacked. Dale talked about how important it is to respect others' opinions and never tell them they're wrong. He used Benjamin Franklin as an example. Franklin wasn't a great speaker, but he was respected because he listened and worked with people. He showed that being humble and willing to learn can help you get what you want. Then Dale gave two real-life examples. The first was Catherine Allred, who used to argue with her boss about a new system. She failed because she was too focused on proving she was right. Later, she asked her boss what they thought, let them help shape the plan, and they accepted it gladly. The second example was R.V. Crowley, a salesman who used to argue with inspectors. He lost money because he kept winning arguments but never solving the real problem. One day, instead of arguing, he watched the inspector work, asked questions, and never said the inspector was wrong. Slowly, the inspector realized he was making mistakes and changed his mind. In the end, they worked together, and Crowley saved his company money. Dale also mentioned Martin Luther King and General Lee, who showed respect by focusing on what others wanted, not what they were wrong about. He ended by saying the key is to be respectful, listen, and never tell someone they're wrong. Dale Carnegie told a story about walking in a park with his dog, Rex. A policeman caught them because Rex wasn't on a leash. The officer was strict and told Carnegie he was breaking the law. Case Carnegie could have Carnegie could have Kirk. Hey, Carnegie Wait, Clark. Carnegie. Brett. said he knew the law and that Rex might hurt something. The officer softened and let him off with a warning. Carnegie didn't argue, and that made the officer treat him kindly. He explained that when you're wrong, it's better to admit it first so the other person feels good about you. He gave another example about a painter named Ferdinand Warren. He made a mistake in a drawing, and the art editor was angry. Instead of defending himself, Warren admitted he was at fault. The editor softened, praised him, and even gave him more work. Warren felt good because he took responsibility. Carnegie also talked about a man named Bruce Harvey who made a mistake in paying an employee. He told his boss he was wrong and took responsibility. His boss respected him more after that. He mentioned General Robert E. Lee, who blamed himself for a big military loss. Even though others could have blamed others, Lee took full responsibility. That showed courage and character. Then, there was a story about a Chinese man who had a strained relationship with his son. He followed tradition and waited for his son to reach out. But after learning about admitting mistakes, he finally apologized. His son forgave him, and they made amends. Carnegie ended by saying that admitting you're wrong is better than trying to fight. It builds respect and makes people like you more. Rockefeller was the boss of a big company in Colorado, and there was a big fight between the workers and the company. The workers were angry and even hurt people. Rockefeller wanted to make peace, so he did something different. Instead of being mean or arguing, he went to talk to the workers' leaders. He acted like a friend, not a boss. He said he was proud to be there and talked about how he had visited their homes and met their families. He made them feel like they were part of the same team. His words were calm and kind, and he didn't push his ideas on them. This made the workers feel respected and listened to. They started to think about the company in a new way. Because of Rockefeller's friendliness, the workers agreed to go back to work without fighting anymore. They didn't even ask for more money, which surprised everyone. Rockefeller's approach showed that being friendly can turn enemies into friends. Other bosses learned from this. For example, a company boss named Robert Black didn't yell at his workers when they went on strike. Instead, he praised them and even gave them gifts. This made the workers feel good, and they ended up working out a deal quickly. Another example was a man named O. L. Straub who wanted to get his rent lower. He didn't argue with his landlord. Instead, he acted happy and praised the landlord's apartment. He talked about how much he liked the place and how he wanted to stay. The landlord was surprised and happy, and he agreed to lower the rent without being asked. Even in work situations, like when a manager named Dean Woodcock had to explain why his team was doing something unusual, he handled it with kindness. He talked to a photographer who was taking pictures of the event, explained the situation, and made the photographer feel important. This helped avoid bad publicity. These stories show that being friendly and understanding can help you get what you want, even in tough situations. It's not about being right, but about making people feel valued. Dale Carnegie told a story about a boy who read a fable about the sun and the wind. The wind wanted to prove it was stronger than the sun. It tried to blow the sun's coat off an old man, but the harder it blew, the tighter the man held his coat. The wind gave up and the sun came out, smiled, and the man took off his coat. The sun showed that being kind and friendly is more powerful than being angry or forceful. Carnegie used this to explain how people respond better when they're treated with respect and kindness. He gave an example about a man named F. Gale Connor who had a problem with his car. Instead of arguing, he talked to the manager in a friendly way, explained the problem, and even praised the dealership. The manager was surprised and happy, and he helped fix the problem. Carnegie also mentioned Aesop, an old Greek storyteller, and how his fables still work today. He said that being friendly and showing appreciation can make people change their minds more easily than yelling or being harsh. Dale Carnegie talked about how it's better to start a conversation by agreeing with someone instead of arguing. He said if you begin by pointing out differences, the other person might say no right away, and that makes it hard to change their mind. But if you start by saying yes, it's easier to get them on your side. He used the example of a bank teller named James Aberson. He met a customer who didn't want to give the bank some information. Instead of getting angry, James asked questions that made the customer say yes a few times. The customer started to feel like the bank was helping him, not just asking for information. Eventually, he gave all the details and even opened a trust account. Then there was a salesperson named Joseph Allison who had trouble selling to a customer. He tried arguing but didn't get anywhere. Then he changed his approach. He asked questions that made the customer say yes, and that made the customer agree to buy. Another example was Eddie Snow, who bought a bow set after a salesperson got him to say yes a few times. Carnegie said this method was used by Socrates, a famous philosopher, who asked questions to get people to agree with him. The idea is to make the other person feel like they're in control and that you're helping them, not arguing with them. So here's the thing. When someone is trying to convince another person, they often talk too much. That doesn't work well. Instead, you should let the other person talk. They know more about their own situation. So ask them questions and let them explain. If you disagree, don't interrupt. Wait until they're done. That helps them feel heard and understood. It also makes them more open to your ideas. This idea works in business too. There was a sales rep named GBR who had a problem. He got laryngitis and couldn't speak, so he wrote a note saying he couldn't talk. The boss took over and talked about his samples. A big discussion happened and GBR won the contract because he let the boss do the talking. That was a smart move. This method also works in family life. A mom named Barbara had a teen daughter named Lori. Lori was acting out, and Barbara was always trying to tell her what to do. One day, Barbara just asked, "Why, Lori, why?" Lori explained everything. Barbara realized she hadn't been listening. After that, Barbara let Lori talk, and their relationship improved a lot. Another example is a man named Charles who interviewed for a job. He asked the boss questions about the company. He showed interest in the boss's story. The boss liked that and hired him. Charles made a good impression by letting the boss talk. Even in hiring, being a good listener helps. A man named Roy let a candidate named Dick talk about the job. Dick talked himself into the job. Roy didn't push him. Dick ended up liking the job because he had time to think it through. People like to talk about their own successes. So if you want friends, let them talk about theirs. A French philosopher said that if you want friends, let them excel you. That makes them feel important. In the end, the best way to win friends and influence people is to let them talk. You listen, they feel heard, and you build trust. That's the real secret. Adolf Seltz was a sales manager who felt his team was losing heart. He called a meeting and asked them what they wanted from him. They shared their hopes, and he wrote them down. Then he asked what he could expect from them. They said things like loyalty and teamwork. Seltz promised to give them those qualities, and the team felt inspired. Sales went up a lot. Seltz said the team felt like they had made a deal with him, and they wanted to keep their part of the bargain. Eugene Wesson had been trying to sell sketches for years but kept failing. One day, he changed his approach. He gave a buyer some unfinished sketches and asked for their ideas. The buyer liked that he was asking for input. Wesson used the buyer's suggestions, and the buyer ended up ordering more sketches. Wesson realized he had been trying to sell the buyer things, but when he let the buyer create the ideas, the buyer bought on his own. This same idea worked in family life too. Paul Davis asked his daughter how she wanted to plan a vacation. She suggested visiting historical sites, and the whole family agreed. The same approach was used by an X-ray company. They sent a letter asking a doctor for his ideas on how to improve their equipment. The doctor felt important and ended up buying the equipment because he felt it was his own idea. Colonel House influenced President Wilson by letting him believe the ideas were his own. House planted ideas in Wilson's mind and let him think about them on his own. This technique worked because people like to feel that ideas are their own. The key is to let others feel that the idea is theirs. That's how you win friends and influence people. Eugene Wesson had been trying to sell sketches for years but kept failing. One day, he changed his approach. He gave a buyer some unfinished sketches and asked for their ideas. The buyer liked that he was asking for input. Wesson used the buyer's suggestions, and the buyer ended up ordering more sketches. Wesson realized he had been trying to sell the buyer things, but when he let the buyer create the ideas, the buyer bought on his own. This same idea worked in family life too. Paul Davis asked his daughter how she wanted to plan a vacation. She suggested visiting historical sites, and the whole family agreed. The same approach was used by an X-ray company. They sent a letter asking a doctor for his ideas on how to improve their equipment. The doctor felt important and ended up buying the equipment because he felt it was his own idea. Colonel House influenced President Wilson by letting him believe the ideas were his own. House planted ideas in Wilson's mind and let him think about them on his own. This technique worked because people like to feel that ideas are their own. The key is to let others feel that the idea is theirs. That's how you win friends and influence people. Now, the book talks about the importance of understanding other people's points of view. People may be wrong, but they don't think they are. Don't criticize them. Try to understand them. You can find out why they think and act the way they do by putting yourself in their place. This helps you build better relationships. A man named Sam Douglas used to criticize his wife for spending too much time on their lawn. She was upset, and their evenings were ruined. After learning this idea, he realized she enjoyed the work and appreciated a compliment. He started helping her and praising her. Their relationship improved because he started seeing things from her point of view. The book also shares a story about someone who tried to stop fires in a park. At first, they told kids to stop burning, but they got angry. Later, the person asked the kids what they were cooking and talked to them like friends. The kids cooperated and helped put out the fires. This shows that thinking of others' feelings makes a big difference. So, the book talks about a magic phrase that can stop arguments and make people listen. It's not a trick, it's real. The phrase is, "I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would feel just as you do." This makes people feel understood and respected. It's not about agreeing, it's about showing you care. The book uses examples to show how this works. One example is about a man named Al Capone. If you were him, you'd feel the same way he did. So, when people are upset or wrong, you don't criticize them. You understand them. You see their side. Then there's a story about a speaker who made a mistake in geography. He said Louisa May Alcott lived in Concord, New Hampshire, when she actually lived in Concord, Massachusetts. People got angry, but instead of getting defensive, he apologized sincerely. He showed he understood their feelings and cared. That made the angry person apologize back. It turned hostility into friendship. Another example is about a hotel manager and an elevator repairman. The manager didn't want to shut down the escalator for too long. The repairman didn't argue. He showed he understood the manager's concerns and explained why the longer shutdown was better. The manager agreed because he felt respected. The book also talks about a piano teacher who didn't criticize a student for long fingernails. Instead, she praised the nails and gently suggested trimming them. The student did it on her own because she felt understood. These stories show that when you show sympathy and understand others, they are more willing to listen and cooperate. It's not about being right, it's about being kind and seeing things from their point of view. So, the book talks about how people like to feel good about themselves. They want to think they're fair and honest. Even if they're not, they want to believe they are. That's why it's better to talk about good reasons for doing things, not just the real ones. It's about making people feel respected and understood. Then there's a story about a man who had a tenant who wanted to leave his apartment early. The tenant had signed a lease, but he still wanted to go. The landlord didn't argue. Instead, he said he believed the tenant was honest and would stay if he felt respected. He offered to let the tenant decide. The tenant came back, paid his rent, and decided to stay. He said it was the right thing to do. Another example is about a newspaper editor. When a picture of him was published without permission, he didn't say, "Don't publish me." He said, "My mother doesn't like it." That appealed to people's feelings about family. There is also a story about a man named James L. Thomas. He was asked to collect money from 6 customers who didn't pay. The company tried to argue and blame the customers, but it didn't work. James didn't argue. He listened, apologized, and asked the customers to be fair. They did, and even got new cars from the company later. The main idea is that when you talk to people about what they value, like fairness, honesty, and respect, you can get them to do what you want. It's not about being right, it's about making them feel good about themselves. A newspaper in Philadelphia was getting bad rumors. People said it had too much ads and not enough news. The paper needed to stop the bad talk. Instead of arguing, they did something clever. They took all the news and articles from one day and made a book. It had 307 pages and showed how much interesting stuff they actually published every day. They sold it for just a few cents. This made people realize the paper had a lot of good content. It was a way to show the truth in a vivid and exciting way. This is about showing, not just telling. Movies and TV use drama to get people to pay attention. They show, not just say. For example, a company sold more rat poison when they put live rats in the window display. Advertisers use drama to make their products seem better. You can do this too. Jim Yeamans used pennies to show how old cash registers wasted money. It made the shop owner pay attention. In home life, people use drama too. A dad made a toy train to get his kids to clean up. He dressed them up and made it fun. At work, Mary Catherine Wolfe used a form letter to get her boss to meet with her. She dramatized how much she wanted to talk. It worked because it showed she was serious. James B. Boynton used dramatization to get a big boss to listen. He brought jars of cold cream and showed the data in a way that was easy to understand. The boss stopped arguing and started asking questions. It made a big difference. Charles Schwab had a problem. His mill wasn't meeting its production goals, and the manager was stuck. He tried everything, telling, pushing, even threatening, but nothing worked. Schwab didn't give up. He asked the manager why the workers weren't producing. The manager said he didn't know. Schwab then asked the workers how many heats they made that day. They said 6. Schwab wrote a big 6 on the floor. The next morning, the night shift saw the number and thought they were doing better. They changed it to a 7. The day shift saw that and wanted to show they were better. They worked hard and left a 10. The whole mill started doing better because they wanted to prove they could do more. Schwab said the key was to challenge people. He didn't mean to make them compete for money, but to make them want to excel. He used this idea with a governor who was scared to take a tough job. He challenged him, and the governor took the risk. People are motivated by the chance to prove themselves, to feel important, and to win. That's why challenges work. That's why people do their best when they're given a chance to excel. Charles Schwab had a problem. His mill wasn't meeting its production goals, and the manager was stuck. He'd tried everything, telling, pushing, even threatening, but nothing worked. Schwab didn't give up. He asked the manager why the workers weren't producing. The manager said he didn't know. Schwab then asked the workers how many heats they made that day. They said 6. Schwab wrote a big 6 on the floor. The next morning, the night shift saw the number and thought they were doing better. They changed it to a 7. The day shift saw that and wanted to show they were better. They worked hard and left a 10. The whole mill started doing better because they wanted to prove they could do more. Schwab said the key was to challenge people. He didn't mean to make them compete for money, but to make them want to excel. He used this idea with a governor who was scared to take a tough job. He challenged him, and the governor took the risk. People are motivated by the chance to prove themselves, to feel important, and to win. That's why challenges work. That's why people do their best when they're given a chance to excel. Now, let's look at another example. A friend of mine was at the White House during Calvin Coolidge's time. He heard Coolidge praise a secretary for her dress and her looks. The secretary was surprised and a little embarrassed. Then Coolidge told her to be more careful with her punctuation. It was a way to give praise first, then offer criticism. It's easier to listen to something unpleasant after you've heard something good. Another example is McKinley, who was running for president in 1896. A Republican gave him a speech he thought was great. McKinley didn't want to hurt the man's feelings, so he praised the speech first, then said it wasn't right for the occasion. He helped the man rewrite it, and the man became a good speaker. Abraham Lincoln wrote a letter to a general named Hooker during the Civil War. Lincoln praised Hooker before pointing out his mistakes. He didn't call them faults, but said he wasn't satisfied with some things. Lincoln was careful and diplomatic. Then there's a story about a man named W.P. Gaw. He had a problem with a subcontractor. Instead of arguing, he started by praising the man's family, his business, and his factory. He made the man feel good, and then the man promised to deliver on time without being asked. Finally, a branch manager named Dorothy Rubalewski helped a new employee by starting with praise. She noticed the employee was nervous, so she told her she was doing well with customers. Then she helped her with the balancing process. The employee improved and stayed with the team. Charles Schwab saw some workers smoking in his steel mill, even though there was a no smoking sign. Instead of scolding them, he gave each man a cigar and asked them to smoke outside. The workers felt respected and appreciated, and they liked him for not being harsh. Schwab knew how to handle the situation without making anyone feel bad. John Wanamaker, a store owner, noticed a customer waiting alone at a counter while the salespeople ignored her. He quietly helped her and then left, making sure she got her purchase. He didn't say a word, but his actions showed he cared. A mayor named Carl Langford had trouble being seen by the public because his staff kept people away. He solved the problem by removing the door to his office. His staff got the message, and he became more approachable. Dale Carnegie explained that when we criticize someone, we should start with praise and use and instead of but. This makes the person feel respected and more likely to change their behavior. He shared a story about a woman who praised workers for cleaning up, and they started doing it on their own. A master sergeant used the same idea to get his soldiers to cut their hair. He didn't yell, but he showed them how to be leaders by example. A few men followed his lead and got haircuts. Finally, there was a story about a preacher named Lyman Abbott. He wrote a speech but was nervous about reading it. His wife didn't criticize him directly. Instead, she said it would make a good article. He realized she was right, tore up the speech, and delivered a natural, heartfelt message. Dale Carnegie talked about how it's better to mention your own mistakes first when you want to point out someone else's. He used his niece, Josephine, as an example. She was young and not very experienced, and at first he wanted to criticize her. But then he remembered all the mistakes he'd made when he was her age. He realized she was doing better than he had been, and that made him rethink how he treated her. From then on, he started by saying, "You made a mistake, but I've made worse ones too. I was no better than you are now." This made Josephine feel respected, and she started to improve. He also told a story about an engineer named E.G. Dallistone who had a secretary making spelling mistakes. Instead of just pointing them out, Dillistone shared his own spelling struggles and showed her his spelling book. The secretary started to take it more seriously, and her mistakes went down. Then there was the story of Prince von Bülow, who saved himself from a furious Kaiser by first praising him and then admitting his own shortcomings. The Kaiser forgave him and became his friend. Finally, there was Clarence Zerhusen, who told his son about how he started smoking and couldn't stop. His son decided not to smoke and never did. Dale Carnegie talked about how people don't like being told what to do. He gave an example about a man named Owen D. Young who was known for being a great leader. Instead of giving direct orders, he would say things like, "You might consider this," or "What do you think of this?" He let his workers make decisions and learn from their own mistakes. This made them feel important and helped them improve without feeling blamed. He also told a story about a teacher who lost control when a student parked his car in a bad spot. The teacher yelled at the student and made everyone in the class resent him. But if the teacher had just asked, "Whose car is in the driveway?" and suggested moving it, the student would have done it happily, and no one would have been upset. Then there was a manager named Ian MacDonald who had a tough order to handle. Instead of pushing his team, he explained the situation and asked for their ideas. The workers came up with solutions and helped make the order happen. This shows that asking questions and involving people makes them more committed and happy. Dale Carnegie talked about how important it is to let people save face. He gave an example from General Electric, where they had to remove Charles Steinmetz from his job. Steinmetz was really smart, but he wasn't good at managing a department. The company didn't want to hurt his feelings, so they gave him a new title, consulting engineer, and let someone else run the department. Steinmetz was happy, and the company felt good too. They had managed to keep him without making him feel bad. Carnegie explained that letting someone save face is really important. Most people don't think about it, but it makes a big difference. He told a story about a boss who fires employees with more care. Instead of being harsh, the boss praises the worker, says they did well, and encourages them. This makes the worker feel respected, not hurt. He also shared a story about a manager named Fred Clark. A boss was being unfair to a worker, making him feel embarrassed. The worker stopped being helpful and left the company. But another worker, Anna Mazzone, had a boss who supported her when she made a mistake. The boss praised her, said it was okay to make errors, and believed in her. That made Anna feel valued and motivated. Carnegie said even if you're right, you should never make someone lose face. He ended with a quote from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, saying it's a crime to hurt someone's dignity. A real leader always lets people save face. Pete Barlow was my old friend who traveled with circuses and vaudeville shows. He trained dogs for his acts, and whenever a dog showed even a little progress, he praised them, gave them treats, and made a big deal about it. I realized that this was a smart way to encourage improvement. Why didn't people use the same idea when working with people instead of animals? Why not praise instead of criticize? I thought about how praise can change lives. A boy in Naples wanted to sing, but was told he had no voice. His mother believed in him, praised him, and helped him get lessons. That boy became Enrico Caruso, the greatest opera singer of his time. Another boy in London, Charles Dickens, struggled with poverty and rejection but kept writing. One day, an editor praised his work, and that praise changed his life forever. Another boy, H. G. Wells, was working in a store but was encouraged by his schoolmaster to try teaching. That praise led him to write famous books. These stories show how praise can inspire people to reach their potential. A man named Keith Roper used this idea at work. He praised a new employee for good work, and the employee changed his attitude and became loyal. Praise needs to be specific and sincere, not just flattery. It helps people feel valued and motivated. It's not about tricks, but about a new way of thinking. When you truly praise someone, you help them grow. It's a powerful tool for changing people and making them better. So here's what happened. A man named Henry Henke had a mechanic named Bill who started doing worse work. Instead of yelling at him or threatening him, Henke called him in and had a serious talk. He told Bill he used to be a great mechanic, that customers had praised his work, but lately he wasn't meeting his old standards. Henke made it clear he wasn't happy, but wanted to work with Bill to fix things. Bill took this seriously and started doing better work again. Henke had given him a good reputation to live up to, and Bill didn't want to let him down. Another story is about a servant girl named Marie. She was treated like nothing, called Marie the dishwasher. But one day, a lady told her, "Marie, you do not know what treasures are within you." Marie believed it, and her whole life changed. She started taking care of herself and eventually married a nice man. A small phrase had changed her entire life. Then there was Bill Parker, a sales rep, who got rejected by a store manager. He went back and said he hadn't explained everything and asked for another chance. The manager couldn't refuse because Bill had given him a reputation to live up to. A dentist named Dr. Fitzhugh thanked his cleaner Bridget for a job well done and asked her to polish the cup holders. Bridget did it so well that the office looked brand new. She didn't have to spend extra time, she just wanted to live up to the reputation he gave her. Finally, a teacher named Mrs. Hopkins had a student named Tommy, who was known as a troublemaker. But she told the class, "Tommy, I understand you are a natural leader. I'm going to depend on you to help me make this class the best." Tommy started behaving well, and the whole class did better. A man named Frank had a hard time learning to dance. He was getting married, so his fiancée made him take lessons. The first teacher told him he was all wrong and needed to start over. That made him feel bad and he quit. The next teacher said he wasn't bad, just a bit old-fashioned. She praised his rhythm and said he had a natural talent. That made him feel hopeful and he kept trying. He ended up being a better dancer because of her encouragement. Dale Carnegie talks about how people will try harder if they feel they can improve. He gives examples like Lowell Thomas, who helped a friend learn bridge by saying it was easy. Another example is Ely Culbertson, who almost gave up on bridge until a teacher told him he had a flair for it. That made him try again and eventually make a career out of it. Then there's a boy named David, who had a bad accident and was told he was brain damaged. He couldn't read, couldn't do math, and was behind in school. But his dad encouraged him to learn math because he loved working with electronics. They used flashcards and celebrated every small improvement. David started to believe he could learn, and his life changed. He got good grades, made a science exhibit, and ended up on the honor roll. Dale Carnegie talks about how people are more likely to do what you want if they feel happy about it. He gives examples from history and everyday life. In 1915, Woodrow Wilson wanted to bring peace to Europe. He chose Colonel Edward M. House to go instead of William Jennings Bryan, who was disappointed. House made Bryan feel good by suggesting that Wilson thought Bryan was too important for the job. Bryan was satisfied. Wilson also used this idea when he invited William Gibbs McAdoo to join his cabinet. He made McAdoo feel like he was doing Wilson a favor, which made McAdoo feel important. But Wilson didn't use this tact when he refused to let Republican leaders join him in the League of Nations. He snubbed them, and that hurt his chances of getting support. Carnegie also shares stories about parents, teachers, and leaders using this idea. A man made his son happy about doing chores by giving him money for doing them. A store manager gave a worker a title and responsibility, which changed her attitude. A woman gave a boy a title as her detective to stop kids from ruining her lawn. Napoleon used titles and honors to inspire his soldiers, and it worked. Carnegie lists the key points to make people happy about doing what you want. He says to be sincere, know what you want, be empathetic, match benefits to what the person wants, and present the idea in a way that makes them feel like they'll benefit. He ends by saying that if you use this principle, you'll be more effective as a leader. Dale Carnegie's story shows how he started as a poor boy from a Missouri farm. He had to work hard, sometimes riding horses to school and helping on the farm at night. He was shy and felt like he didn't fit in, but he wanted to be respected and make a difference. So he tried to win a public speaking contest. He practiced a lot, even while doing chores. He imagined himself speaking to pigeons on the farm. But he kept losing. He was discouraged, but he didn't give up. His story shows that even if you start from the bottom, you can rise if you believe in yourself and keep working. His journey inspired many people, and his ideas helped others become better leaders and communicators. Dale Carnegie was so discouraged after losing all those speaking contests that he even thought about giving up. But then, something changed. He started winning every contest in college. Other students wanted to learn from him, and they all began to win too. After college, he tried selling courses to ranchers in the western US, but he struggled. He got so down that he cried in his hotel room in Nebraska. He couldn't go back to school, so he decided to try a new job in Omaha. He had no money for a train ticket, so he rode a freight train, taking care of wild horses in exchange for a ride. He got a job selling bacon, soap, and lard in South Dakota. He traveled by train, stagecoach, and horseback, and slept in simple hotels. He studied sales, played poker with Indians, and learned how to collect money. He even sold shoes to pay for his orders. He worked hard, covered a lot of ground, and turned a weak sales territory into the best. He refused a promotion, went to New York, studied acting, and then returned to sales. He sold cars but hated it. He wanted to write books but couldn't afford to. He decided to teach public speaking at the YMCA. They didn't believe it would work, but he taught on commission. His classes grew, and he became famous. He wrote a book that helped many people. He believed anyone could speak well if they had confidence and an idea. He made his students talk every class, and they grew more confident. His courses combined public speaking, sales, and psychology. He helped people use their potential and change their lives. His work became one of the most important in adult education. Dale Carnegie's ideas grew bigger and bigger. His training programs started helping businesses and companies all over the world. He worked with big companies and smaller ones too. His courses helped people become better leaders, sell more, serve customers better, and talk clearly in front of groups. His training made teams work better together and helped companies improve their processes. The Wall Street Journal even said his training was one of the top 25 best in the business world. People from more than 80 countries learned from his programs, and they were offered in 25 languages. His team helped businesses design special training programs for their workers. They also gave online support and one-on-one help to make sure people could improve. His work helped companies reach new levels of success. His training programs were a big part of how he made a lasting impact on the world of business and education. So, what are the key lessons from this book? First, always make people feel important. That's more powerful than trying to change them or criticize them. People are emotional and proud, so they respond better when they feel valued. Another key lesson is to focus on what others want, not just what you want. Think about their needs and show them how to get it. That's how you influence them in a friendly way. Also, never criticize. It only makes people fight back. Instead, be patient, understand, and work on yourself. Lincoln learned that the hard way, and it helped him become a better leader. And don't forget the power of a smile. It shows you care, makes people happy, and opens doors. A smile can turn a grumpy day into something better. Finally, show real interest in others. People love to feel understood and appreciated. When you care, you build stronger, better relationships. That's how you win friends and influence people.